Hello, my darling, my beautiful, my assets of the world. Sorry, I guess that's a bit weird, but I just did a podcast and she said we are all an asset. So I'm gonna just mix that in to the intro as I welcome you, my powerful everyday women of the world, to another Startup Stories podcast where the ambitious everyday woman is heard, held, and served in life, in business, in the spirit, in faith, in every element of your life. Bringing you relatable stories to keep you sane, grounded, and growing as you expand yourself and deliver your purpose to the world. And do we not ever have such a perfect guest for this, you guys? Molly. Molly, I didn't ask you how to help me pronounce your last name before I hit record.
Yeah, it's actually just like you would say roots, like grassroots.
Roots,
Mhm.
perfect. Molly Roots. Oh, what a great last name for like helping women embody or plant their roots into their purpose and flourish from there. So, you guys, Molly, I don't know, showed up on Facebook and sent me a message welcoming me to her group. And I just felt really compelled to get to know her more. And I am thrilled and honored to bring her into this space to share a message with you about leading with purpose, living with peace, fulfilling God's use for you, his desires, his plans for you, and stepping out in your faith as a leader in whatever element of your life that you're called to do so, right? We all have a different role to play and they all interlocked together. And a lot of things that I liked about Molly's platform is the structure, the intention, the slowing down, the faith allowance and following, like keeping your eyes on the Lord to walk in his plans, and just also giving yourself grace as a mom, as a business owner, as a this, as a that, and finding out how to kind of hold yourself organized enough so that you can do these things without burning out, falling apart, right? Just keeping your eye on the prize with some beautiful support around you. So, Molly and I had a chat a little while ago. We're meeting again now, growing and nurturing this friendship, which I'm very invested in, Molly. Never a one and done. And just really honored to host you as a guest on a podcast and have a beautiful conversation with you today.
Yeah, I've just enjoyed our interaction so much, Mia, and your warmth and just your beautiful spirit is really just so attractive. So I'm excited to get to know you better and to share with your audience too.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks. It's like, hearing that, I'm going to do, I did it already. I said thank you because we don't always like to take compliments. But you guys, part of my journey in this is really accepting that that's the truth for me, that that is part of God's vision for me and what he wants. And if he loves me that much, then why can't I love myself that much too? So,
Good.
like I really appreciate those comments because okay, sure, my insecure validate me inner self, but also, yeah, it's safe to be seen this way and it's safe to be that woman. It's safe to show up and um discover more of who I am and let her grow. And I think that might be just a wonderful place for us to start our conversation, Molly. You can share a bit of your background and what you've gone through or chosen, intentionally decided in order to become this version of yourself
Yeah, that's
from
so good. As I was kind of getting ready for this and just thinking like what's on my heart today, I really felt like I wanted to talk about identity and
yeah,
even
great.
what it is to go through an identity crisis because
Yes.
I feel like we do change as women. You know, there's different seasons. Sometimes maybe you're in a season of singlehood or
Mhm.
marriage or family, and then as your children grow, there's just a lot of changes, and with that, identity shifts happen. And so part of my story is just going through that identity shift when about 5 years ago, we made an international move. Our family did. My husband is from the country of South Africa. and we had been living there for almost a decade. And we moved right at the height of COVID back to the US.
Mhm.
And so with that came so many changes. And in my own life, I had been an entrepreneur. I had had this, beautiful business, but it was also something that was kind of eating away at my quality of life
Yeah.
because my mental health was starting to suffer. I was just attached to my phone all the time because I had, customers in different time zones. And so I would even check sometimes in the middle of the night to make sure I
Wow.
could, like, I don't know, I just did. I didn't
Yeah.
have boundaries.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so and then some things changed in my family too, where my youngest daughter, who is a miracle baby, like she has the most amazing story, and she's really our biggest story.
Mm.
But her life is complicated, and she started to have some problems that were, kind of just popping out that needed my attention. And so long story short, I just didn't feel aligned with my business anymore.
Right.
But it was our bread and butter. It was how we were sustaining ourselves. So I was like full of angst about what would happen if I let go of it, and
Yeah.
really had a long time dealing with this with the Lord, and delayed my obedience to him when he was telling me it was time to walk away. I
Yeah.
was like, oh God, no, let's have a plan. It's like,
Let me decide, not you, Almighty.
like, how's this going to work out?
Oh,
And so finally I just ripped the band-aid off and walked away, and
yeah.
just entered a whole season of change and transition
Yeah.
that's lasted quite a couple of years, where God has helped me to like sit down with him and realign what this is all about.
Mhm.
That this isn't just about, measuring up to, like, comparing myself to other people who maybe seem like they have it more together, who are actually like hitting these huge goals. I really just had to divorce myself of a lot of the talk that I'd been listening to
Yes.
in that journey as an entrepreneur, and even some things that were out of alignment spiritually that I had gotten involved in. I didn't realize it at the time. But when I took a step back, I was like, that is not biblical. Some things that I was believing and doing and practicing. So the last, like, 3 years or so have been a process of reestablishing my identity in the Lord, that, I'm not, to him, I'm not an entrepreneur first.
Right.
I'm his child, and he
Yeah.
loves me, and he just wants me to be at rest in his presence and let him take care of me. And then the ideas that come and the business that was birthed from that has been completely different. It's
Right.
just been a coming from a place of rest and peace, and no longer with that anxiety of, having to create some kind of amazing feedback for the world to see,
Yeah.
success, what
Yeah.
success looks like.
Yeah. So there is the identity piece already of letting go of what you believed for a while, the only way to run a business and to make that money and provide, and then to have to so uncomfortably and obediently trust the Lord to walk you forward into something else. And her Facebook group is called Take Back Your Day. And I love that combination of words of take back your day, of be a good steward of today's work as it connects to tomorrow, next week, years ahead, etc. And it sounds like in this shift too, there would have been a lot of um, restoration happening, right? Like redefining who Molly is, how is she going to show up, and where is she going to establish boundaries with herself and set her priorities back into God's divine order.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly what I actually use those words, the divine order, and what that looks like. And
Yeah.
it's so easy to, say that you want to put God first.
Yeah.
And, we try to do that. But then, next on the divine order list is your family,
Hmm.
and then your work,
Hmm.
whether it's a ministry, whether it's a business, it doesn't matter. And the temptation is for us to flip those last two. And
Yeah.
especially if you're in the world like a Christian service or something that you're doing for God, it's very easy to think, well, that has to be my priority, that my family should, just kind of, they're going to have to sacrifice some things. And sometimes, there are things that we do, that we work hard, but our priorities have to be, our family, our marriage, our children, because they're our first disciples. And those are the things we're going to be accountable for
Yeah.
before him one day.
Yeah.
And I just felt really, I mean, my husband and I preach this. It's something that
Mm.
I think we just need to remind each other and other people of, because the temptation is very real to put work first and to put those things, and they kind of become idols very easily.
The work is something we do. The family is how you show up as a in a state of being, in a state of integrity and moral character and alignment to the Bible's teachings to take care of each other and build that community and that together that again togetherness, right? And
Right.
I just want to outline that because it's not indicating not to pursue those things, but not to um, put them higher than what really matters. Business will come and go. Molly's already shown us that she's had a complete change of work and where her business comes from. And I love that you said God doesn't see me as an entrepreneur first. He sees me as his child first. This realignment of priorities, and Molly, maybe you can walk us through what it's been like implementing them in your life and how now things are sort of coming back around to still provide and take care of you, but from a holier place.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. One thing that the Lord talked to me about a long time ago is making a covenant of peace with him.
Mhm.
And what that means to me is to just fight for my peace. That's something that I'm not going to walk out into the world or any direction until I have it. And it is a wrestling match sometimes. I used to be really into the Enneagram, and as like an Enneagram 6 was my type, I was kind of somewhat horrified to discover anxiety was something that was very familiar to this type.
Mhm.
And so I had to really wrestle with that and just, ask the Lord and say, this is not my birthright. Like, I am not going to receive that, that my inheritance is anxiety. And so to walk that out meant to really make a covenant of peace and say, okay, I'm not going to live in that state of, stress or anxiety, but I'm going to live and fight for my peace. And so then what that looked like was very, it really involved some laying down of, like how I mentioned, my business and our paycheck and everything, and walking away from that and being okay with, quote unquote, just being a mom,
Yeah.
which is such a fallacy because moms are, it's one of the highest callings, that you can have and be obedient to and say yes to. And so through that, just realizing I needed time to heal my nervous system and to be there for my child that had a lot of special needs and was going through some medical problems and things. And so, yeah, so that was a big part of it, is just laying it down. And I think the principle there is, when we lay things down before the Lord and you let them die, it's up to him if he's going to give it back again. It's like what Abraham did with Isaac, and he really had to be
Yeah.
ready to like totally end
Mhm.
it. And I
Mhm.
think that's what God wants. Like, he wants everything. He's not happy if we give most of it and just kind of reserve a little bit. And so that was for me a big part of it, is just laying things down and even being okay with not, making an income or
Mhm.
just taking care of my home and homeschooling and these other things I was doing. And so then gradually, I think God kept it alive in my spirit. And I
Yeah.
have a lot of dreams, or there's seasons when I have a lot of dreams. So he would give me dreams to kind of remind me of, like, this is what, I've put in you. This is something that I want to see birthed. And so I was able to keep those things kind of going, like, okay, God, it's not done. Like, I'm not finished. Like, this isn't the end. And
Mhm.
so just being really patient and allowing him to bring something to me. And I'm very like open to the prophetic. And so I would get words from people sometimes, this or that, or a scripture, and just kind of holding those things and writing them down and praying over them and just trusting that this will come to pass, in God's timing. And it's not going to be by might or by power, but it'll be by his spirit. And
Yeah.
so there were quite a couple of like false starts. I would try something and it just, my heart wasn't in it. Something would happen where I thought, this really isn't the environment that I want to be spending my time in.
Mhm.
And so there was some of that trial and error. And I made some big mistakes too. And God's grace was just there to help me kind of get myself out of some bad financial decisions, when I made an investment that I felt like wasn't really in alignment with who I wanted to work with. I had to get myself out of that and get disentangled from a relationship that wasn't, didn't have peace at the foundation of it. And so he was just very kind and gracious to help me kind of figure it out as I went along. And we want to have the whole roadmap,
Yeah.
like what's it all going to look like.
Yeah.
But in reality, he just shows us the next turn,
Yeah.
he gives us that next step. And so just learning how to be patient and walk with God through different business decisions and trying to birth different things.
All that all sounds so like peaceful, surrendered, right? And what I love is you're holding yourself accountable, you, the general you, and really trying to listen deeper, really trying to look at yourself as to where you're still trying to um, create an outcome versus aligning yourself to his will, because that is the ultimate. And he's just always waiting for us to come and follow in step, right? It's us who are buzzing around like flies on a fruit or something in this chaotic energy. And in doing so, then, Molly, how has your life softened and opened around that? Like you're being shown mercy and you're being shown breadcrumbs all at the same time to continue to move forward in a certain way, which then must be shifting on your identity, particularly with what you knew for a decade of time and a way of being.
Yeah. You mentioned in the beginning of our conversation, like how it was hard to receive compliments and
Mm,
just like my own intrinsic need for validation
mm,
and things that come from the outside,
yeah,
that are maybe a title or a label or an accomplishment. And, those things are okay, but when it becomes our identity,
yeah.
and then maybe you're not fulfilling those roles anymore or reaching those benchmarks, it can be, really kind of earth shaking. And so just looking at for me how to just be at rest in what God's called me to do and be faithful. I think
Mhm.
faithfulness is sometimes overlooked as a virtue. And it's just that simple, daily walking things out, being obedient to the last thing that God said,
Mhm.
being faithful even when you're not seeing the fruit of
Yeah.
it, and knowing that we do plant seeds in faith and that there will be a harvest, and working on mindset. So for me, it's been a lot of, what do I believe? And those things, I think our beliefs are even more important than our decisions, because if we're making a decision in doubt, that's not going to produce the kind of fruit that we want to see in our lives. But if we're making those decisions in faith, like even if it's maybe not the right decision or
Mhm.
the best decision, the fruit of that is going to be much different. And so looking at what is my expectation, what do I believe about things, not making things mean more than they should.
Yes.
In sales, like when somebody says no, it's not a rejection of
Mhm.
who I am. It's just, more about them,
Yeah.
right? And the unique place that they're in. And so just reworking mindset has been really, I've been working a lot on that.
I'm going to give an example that something that happened to me this week that I think will really put this into the day-to-day context. So, a friend of mine was featured in a summit they're basically like a marketing platform community. Beautiful, robust, genuine, heart-centered. But the journey that I went on to assess my um, fit, I suppose, as a future summit speaker wasn't exactly clear when it came to kind of making a next step, right? So maybe I'm getting a bit convoluted in talking. I applied to be a speaker in a summit. I thought that's what I was doing, but it turns out that becoming a speaker in that summit means becoming a recipient of a coaching program that leads for 9 to 12 months. And nowhere in that was clear. And here I was moving forward, thinking that this was going to be a good decision, and that it would elevate my visibility and et cetera, and be a nice and like value compatible project. And then it comes forward near the end of like a review interview that this is actually part of entering a coaching program. So that sat with me in a few different ways of like, did I not do my due diligence in getting ready? Or was this sort of interestingly marketed, right? And then to not attach meaning to that, I had to kind of like breathe, relax, let go. It's not my value. It's not my worth. It's not this. And then say, well, if God doesn't want this, he's closed that door, and trusting that above everything else and letting that go. And then I went back and I looked through again some of the materials, and I didn't see anywhere in there any indications of this. I'm not questioning their integrity. It's their strategy. It's their whole setup and everything. What it did for me was what I feel like you're talking about now of, is this in true alignment and in true, like, I guess the fastest walk that I can do in the Lord's will and plans for me, or not, because we will take ourselves on detours. And then we'll say, well, why are you closing that door? I thought this was the door you wanted me to go on. And he's like, no, not really. Like, that was you. I'm over here. And what that experience is now showing me, and he's reminding me, because I already know, less is more in my case. My visibility is not going to come from being featured in somebody else's coaching program as a summit speaker. My visibility is going to come from these intimate, really soul-led conversations and moments where we're not just getting a message out and bragging about how awesome we are. We're really imparting wisdom for how to live your life in a godly way, particularly in this conversation, to keep you encouraged so that you can reduce those distractions and you can stay more clear. More is not more. More is just like empty calories, right? That stick on your beautiful body of any age and weight, ladies. You love that body, love it hard. So hopefully we can see how this applies in elements of our life, and that it helps us to appreciate when he's closing doors that we thought for sure, oh, this must be the next thing because it came with these signs or whatever. It's adding meaning. It's adding meaning. But in the end, it allowed me to reflect and go, I love what they're doing. I'd love to be a part of it. But I've learned that I want to do something like that that's even more honest and earnest and lead
Yeah.
down that way. And you guys have no idea what it's going to be. And that's okay, because he's led me around the corner that you were just talking about.
Yeah. I found that things don't happen the same way twice in
Yeah,
our lives, and maybe we're looking back at how something went down before and trying to recreate it
right.
or to make it happen again. And it's going to
Mm-hmm.
be different, because
Mm-hmm.
the important part is the process we're in,
Mm-hmm.
the being prepared,
Oh,
that we're
yeah,
always being prepared for what's next.
yeah,
And we go from glory to glory. Like that's also a kingdom principle, that things get better in our lives and there's upgrades. But in
mm-hmm.
order to be like ready for that upgrade, we have to go through some things,
Yeah,
and we have to be willing to go through that process and, not just take the easy way out. And we're always looking for a shortcut or, maybe this is it. But yeah, we don't want to spend more, longer than necessary, more time than necessary in that place of the wilderness, I call it,
totally.
that time of preparation. But it has a purpose. It's important to realize, none of those experiences are wasted at all. They're all going to become part of our story of
Mhm.
the next part of our lives and the testimony that we can speak and use and will encourage other people. That's the point of it, is that we want to be able to help people with the things that we've gone through. So I think that's a really important piece to remember in the struggles and, in the trying to figure it out time, that
Mhm.
all of these things will be used in some good way.
Yeah, and letting letting that come through when you're going through one of those things, right? Accepting it as part of a bigger puzzle and a bigger revelation leading to another glory. Molly, you have such an eloquent way of speaking that I want to give you more and more of the stage in this episode. So, not to be too interview style, but what have you learned so far about your identity in the works that God has put through you and how He's shifted you into this new lifestyle, I guess?
That's a good question. Um, I think some of it is just accepting who I am.
Mhm.
And I'm someone that fits in very well with people who are not my own culture.
Mhm.
And so that's been something that has been hard to fit back in to my home country.
Yeah.
That's been a big identity crisis for me, is to realize, like, why do I struggle with people that are of the place where I'm from? It should be easier, right?
Mhm.
And it's actually not. I grew up on in a cross-cultural environment on an Indian reservation. That was part of my DNA as a young child, and I've always been drawn to people from other cultures, other countries. And my spiritual gift is missionary, and that's just what I want to do. And so then to realize, like, God was sending me back to my own people, it's been a really unusual process to, like, figure out, how do I relate to people
Mhm.
around here that I'm so much alike. And I'm always looking for that one that's the foreigner, or the someone that, and then coming to understand that's a gift that He's given me. It's not just a weakness, or not just that I'm weird or
Yeah.
socially awkward,
Yeah.
as I feel most of the time, that actually He's made me that way, to, like, seek out those people that also feel like they don't maybe fit in here, and
Mm.
to be able to, you know, build a friendship or just be a blessing to them in some way. And so I guess looking, to that place of acceptance of who I am and the gifts He's given me, and not apologize for it. Learning how to deal with some unhealthy emotional habits or things I've been, just living with for a long time, about in relationships, how to handle those better, and doing some inner healing. That's been a big part of this identity shift, is just coming to understand, like, maybe it's something you do in your 40s, you just, like, kind of understand yourself better. And
Yeah,
so I've been,
sometimes.
working on that. And yeah,
Yeah.
just more self-acceptance, I think, and
Yeah.
just not self-love in a
Mhm.
funny way, but just be like, what, this is who I am. And
Yes.
it might not make sense to other people. They might not like it. They might not agree with the things that I'm doing or following or pursuing, or the reason that I have for waking up in the morning. And that doesn't matter. It doesn't
Mhm.
matter if they don't agree with it or don't see the vision. As visionary women, it's like, I've got something in me that's just driving me. I can't turn this off.
Yeah.
And realizing that's there on purpose. Whether or not, like, I ever reach that particular goal doesn't really matter, because it's, causing me to take risks and, take steps of faith. And courage follows faith. It's just something that comes. And so you take that step, maybe you're full of fear. I know I usually am. It's like, okay, I'm going to do it. This is scary. But then the courage comes. It's like, oh, okay, I didn't die.
Yeah.
It's like, I can keep going. So it follows just like a shadow, and it's going to be there. So that's something that you only have it once you've taken that step. And I talk a lot about transition.
Mhm.
I think that's a really, it's just such a vulnerable time in our lives when we're transitioning from one thing to the next.
Yeah.
And so what we need to have, character character quality wise, is to go through those transitions well and
Mhm.
end the previous season well. And then you've got to have the faith to get through that. Like, if you're picture a trapeze artist, they have to let go of that one trapeze before they can grab onto the other. You can't hang on to them both.
That's right.
You're going to get split
Yeah.
apart. So just in that transition, it's like a liminal space. There's
Yeah.
nothing to hold on to. You're just there, and you're kind of
Yeah.
suspended in midair, and you're like, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
And then that's the life of faith, is then we reach out and we can grab hold of the new. And in Philippians, it talks about forgetting what's behind and pressing on towards what lies ahead. And so that's been kind of a life verse of mine. It's like, okay, I'm going to let go of the old and grab
Mhm.
onto the new.
Mhm.
And it's always hard, because we get very comfortable in our space. And that's one of the enemies that we have to fight is comfort, because we don't want things to, be uncomfortable. And it's just part of the human experience. And so God is always, facilitating that growth out of our comfort zones to do things and to grab hold of what's new. So,
Yeah. This is a really tangible way of describing an evolving identity. For a certain period, like when we're children, we're open and curious and expressive and not judging each other. But it starts young. My 6-year-old, I'm seeing elements already, and I'd say they've been little bits showing up for a year or so, so from age 5. And then as we get older, we're really responding to how the our perception of how the external environment slash people are responding to us. And then we start to shape our identity around that. Then we kind of grow up and settle into things that we've decided and stopped questioning, challenging, or changing. And to do this identity shift requires a desire, hopefully, like a to kind of get out of your own way, but it also requires a deep vulnerability and willingness to move into unknowns and to hold yourself through some of that discomfort. And you can have elements of grief as you change, but if you really want things to be different, then you have to be different. And you have to question, why have I decided this, that, and the other thing about myself? What else could be true? How did I feel earlier in life, or how will I want to feel in the future? And start making some very easy shifts in your day to day. One example for me has been bedtime with my daughter. She does not go to bed early, bless her sweet little heart. And I just trust the Lord that whatever, okay, more time together every day. Sounds good. And not getting mad and just being steady and present and redirecting her, reminding her why rest is important, that it's safe to calm down, that this is how we go to sleep is by laying in our beds and closing our eyes. Whereas even, I don't know, 3+ months ago, I'd lose my poop and just be like, "Brah!" And then, of course, it wasn't mom guilt. It was, why am I choosing this? Why am I choosing to be so frustrated? She is so little and delicate. And the other part that this feeds into is, if that's an identity that I'm choosing, angry bedtime mom, where am I applying that in other parts of my life to myself and other loved ones or other people who have been put into my path in order to receive something from me, but I'm too caught up in my own ego or false identity that I can't serve it to them and get it through. And in my line of work, I see this all the time because people come in highly upset, highly emotional, highly fixated on a situation, and I choose to hold that space for them and see if I can lead them towards softening it. And that is a practice that I do on myself. And when I practice on others, it comes back into me too. And that's how, like, I've been able to shift these bedtimes. And it's way better now. And it's still late, but it is peaceful and loving. And if I can do that with something so simple as bedtime, where else can I truly evolve and honor the Lord by showing up better, more whole, and more what like in order, right? To deliver different outcomes for other people.
yeah, that's so good. Sometimes we have to unlearn things.
Yeah.
And I have 6 children. And so you would think by the time you get to your sixth that you
Yeah.
got it figured out. And I love that example you shared of your child. And our last daughter has a diagnosis called pathological demand avoidance.
Right.
And so I didn't know what that meant. And it's a mouthful to try to explain. So I probably won't dive into it. But basically, what it looks like in my home is that demands cause her to go into a state of fear and anxiety. And so, because of that fear, she can't comply with anything and
Mhm.
basic things, very basic. And like instructions of like bedtime or
Mhm.
can you please bring your cup to the sink? I mean, just pick up your shoes or just very simple things. And so my husband and I have had to relearn how to parent. And I just love the analogy because I've learned how to basically serve her is what it looks like in real life is that I don't really demand anything at this point in our lives. I've reduced demands to just the bare bones to
Mhm.
what we need to do to function. And our whole household, the atmosphere has shifted in such a significant way. So instead of the volatility, instead of the conflict, instead of, the escalating tempers and voices and things, it's much more calm. And I feel sometimes I've worked through this, but I felt very judged for quite a while, just even by other parents, by what we were allowing our child to get away with and
Right.
thinking, and sometimes even
So-called.
that,
Yeah.
Christian communities can be the worst because we have high standards.
Yeah.
And, we're doing things so differently than I didn't believe this was the right way to parent. I mean, if I could have, seen myself now a few years ago, I would have been shocked.
Mhm.
But the fruit of it is, more peace. There's more space in her nervous system for us to like speak truth and to help train
Mhm.
and teach her so that she can be a functioning adult one day.
Mhm.
And so it's been unlearning years and years of things that we did with our other children that were not producing good fruit in her life. And so I think it's helped me to see the world differently and also accept other people and their issues, the things that they come with, instead of feeling like, oh, I have to change them. Or even as a coach, knowing that my role isn't to like try to change anyone. It's just to help them figure out how to ask the right questions,
That's
maybe how to receive whatever is beautiful in this season instead of looking at it as something to fight. And
Mhm.
so kind of getting out of that fight or flight mode in my own family has helped me to help other people to see the things going on in their lives as, perhaps an invitation to something greater instead of just, a stressful circumstance.
it.
So yeah, it's really
Yeah.
good.
To see it as a bridge to something greater.
Right.
Because when you shift now, listening to you, I know your heart is bigger. I know your capacity is bigger, even though there would have been um, some resistance to having to parent and change your identity, your perceptions, your attachments to how you were parenting, and then have to bear the societal questioning to see you doing that. But by going first, you give permission to others and you normalize the levels of, I love how you said the levels of serving that people require. We're meeting them where they are. And I
Yeah.
don't just mean in children, I mean in everybody that we interact with. We can make it about us, and this is the kind of mom I am, and this is how it's going to go down, or this is the kind of employee I am, etc. Or we can really make it about that other person and hold them in a much deeper space that we also benefit from because it changes. It's like very reciprocal change of who we are. And yeah, Molly, in coaching, the coach should be guiding you into yourself and not controlling or directing, right? It's a revelation and an opening up of your own self while they help you sort that out because it can be hard on your own to do that level of work. And in our day to day, this is possible everywhere from how you're going to choose to wash the dishes. And like, this is God at work in my heart, but I am so joyful washing the dishes, cleaning the house, folding the laundry. I make a lot of jokes about laundry in my house of four, not eight. But how lucky, how abundant, how like privilege to be able to have these things. And that softens the heart, which I think just makes us like gentler people to one another, right? And when we do that, it's beyond. Like at work, I love to say when I can crack them, crack their hearts. I crack their hearts. I don't crack their bones, guys. Calm down. Like I get this beautiful honor to soften them and show them something that they kind of wanted but didn't know how to get to or were scared to get to. And that leads a greater benefit that comes with me, and I think continues to reaffirm the identity that's still being created, right? Like we might have an idea and maybe an ego-driven idea of who we want to be, but if we can get deeper than that, and it's, I guess it's a bit cliche, but like kind of really know who we actually are, then new harvests can bloom out of that in a way that um, is far more natural and Holy Spirit driven. Yeah. So tell us now a bit about these changes and, you've put this all together now and you've come into a new season of being able to harvest in your life. And how are you using that now in service of others, like this beautiful face group you've created, coaching other women and helping them, take us into that part of your world.
Yeah. I think it's really helping leaders, specifically, Christian women. And I have a view that I think we're all called to leadership in some way, shape, or form. If you're a disciple of Christ, you should have someone following you,
Mm,
right? And so, sometimes it's in the settings of our homes, maybe it's in a ministry setting or a business or your workplace. Um, Everybody's, audience looks different, but helping women to become better leaders. And so to do that, you have to lead yourself well
yeah.
first. And so a lot of it is what we've been discussing about identity, about inner healing, about processing events through the right lens
Hmm.
and looking at it as like, well, what was God doing in that season? And so learning how to become healthy that way. And also learning how to recognize what your sovereign foundations were. Like, what were the things that God put in place in your very beginnings? And how did those help shape your life? And so looking at life in a series of kind of like stages and processes that we walk through. And then there's life maturing, which,
Hmm.
is kind of processing all these events and all the things, and you're trying things out. And we want to be used by God. We want to
Hmm.
be good workers and good worker bees. But often what happens is that He's working in us.
Yeah.
And so that's really the depth of what's going on. And then you get into, other phases where you are being more fruitful and producing, kind of living your calling out. And what does that look like? What is that season? And ultimately, we want to get to convergence, where everything that's happened in your life, is coming to a head. All the relationships, the experiences, you're done doing the things you're bad at. You can say no to those things that you're just saying yes because you feel like you have to,
Hmm.
and you're really doing the things that you were created to do. And you can look at someone like Billy Graham, for instance, that was just, he reached that point of convergence. And a lot of leaders don't reach that point. Most leaders plateau and they stop growing, and they just kind of stay at that same level and just kind of flatten out or tap out. Or there's different red flags, different landmines that we step on. And you see people all the time that are falling, getting into, maybe it's financial problems or moral failure. Sometimes it's failure at home with their children, and those things take them out completely of leadership, and you don't ever hear from them again. And so we have to learn how to avoid those pitfalls, what they are, how to avoid them. How do you continue growing as a leader even when you've reached some success? What are the things to have in place to continue to become that person that Christ has called you to become? And so I really help, women to do this and to look at their lives through this lens and reach, their goals in life without sacrificing their family on that altar of ambition. or
Yeah.
ministry, whatever it
Yeah.
is, to really, look at what success means to the Lord. And ultimately to figure out why we're doing the things that we're doing. What is our like philosophy of ministry, if you could call it that? I know it's a mouthful, but
Yeah.
sometimes we're just on autopilot. I mean, we just kind of do the same things habitually every day. And
Mm-hmm.
if we don't stop and think about why or how, if we're going to develop other people, how are we doing that?
Yeah.
And putting those down. And so you can kind of say, like, this is why I do the things I do.
Yeah.
This is what I believe about it. This is what God has taught me. And so, kind of having some framework to help make decisions and help develop other people, because that's the number one job of a Christian leader, is to develop people. So it's important that we think about, how we're doing it and why we're doing it, so that, we can leave a footprint here
Mm-hmm.
on this earth, and that our work doesn't just crumble. We want it to be able to stand. So, yeah, so I have a course that kind of walks women through this process, and it's always different for each person and their situation and their circumstances, what they're going through. And through transition is just a big part of our lives. We're always, one thing that's for sure and certain is that things will change. They're
Yeah.
not going to stay the same. So, just staying soft and pliable and adaptable and able to, not get bent out of shape that way.
And I hear and see that trapeze example that you gave, and being willing to let go and float for a moment before catching the next bar and swinging into the next step. Like that, I've heard it called the gap as well, where you're in the gap of your growth.
Mm.
And it can be the most vulnerable because it can be so easy to just whoosh, go back to what was. Right? And that is a beautiful space to encourage somebody to stay in and move ahead from. It's just like you have such a presence and such a clear understanding and messaging around your work in the world, Molly. It's so beautiful to sit here and pay witness to that and receive from that. And I just want to thank you for sharing that wisdom and this message around identity, which leads us through our lives and into um, other fulfillments that are waiting for us is such like kind of the epicenter of it all.
Thank you, Mia. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you guys, I'm going to share all her links in the socials for you. And if you felt that pull, please go and have a conversation with her, or join her Facebook group and spend some time in that. There's no way you won't grow from being in her space. Thanks,
Well, thank you
Molly.
for the conversation and the opportunity. And I just love what you're doing. Just kind of spotlighting the everyday woman. I think that's just amazing. There's heroes all around us, and everyone has a story. So
Mhm.
just giving, someone like me a platform to share that is really such a special gift.
Thank you.